Hey everyone, DJP had the biggest event that we've ever done just a few days ago. So last Friday night we shot and live streamed a concert, some local Utah artists, young artists, and it was live streamed to teenagers, basically teenagers in parts of Asia. So in terms of viewership, I'm going to estimate we had about 10,000 people watching. The concert was streamed in 4 languages to, say, teenagers in Japan, Mongolia, Korea, and I believe Guam was the fourth one. It was translated, like I say, it was translated into four. We had the original English, and then it was translated into 3 additional languages. And each one of those languages was sent to both YouTube and Facebook. I was only given links. These were private. I was only given links to the English feeds, and they had combined, they had about 3,500 viewers for those two. So 2 of the 8, so 1 of the 4 languages, was about 3,500 viewers. So my guess is there was about 10,000 people watching. Anyway, so this was huge. This is a big event. It's something that I've been looking forward to for a while. Something we got hired to do about a month ago or so. And kind of a big deal. You know, we are actually working for the North Asia area of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is huge. Something that I was very much looking forward to get in with an organization that big and make the contacts there was pretty exciting. But it was very low budget. They didn't anticipate that they were going to need much of a video crew initially, and so they budgeted very, very little for the video crew. And so, yeah, we didn't make a whole lot on this one. This was more about making contacts within the organization for us than anything else. But in terms of the crew, we had 4 that were on video crew. So me providing me providing all the equipment. Paul, who you've met on the channel as camera operator. Dave, who you've met on this channel as a camera operator, and then another friend of mine, a guy named Grant, as a 3rd camera operator. In terms of the setup, I had the trailer in the parking lot. We shot this in a recording studio called Solarium in Alpine, Utah. And I'm just going to put this in a window so you guys can kind of watch some of it while I'm talking. So yeah, we shot it at Solarium, and they brought in a separate guy for audio and separate crew for lighting. And yeah, so 3 artists. The 3 artists were Lexi Walker. She was the one that was hosting the event. Adam Turley, and then Madeline Page. Of those 3, the only one I'd worked with before was Madeline Page. We've shot concerts for Madeline several times in the past. Amazing artists, all 3 of them. But I was most excited to work with Madeline because I will absolutely love her voice. If you probably haven't heard of her, but go look her up. She's actually quite the up-and-coming artist, has an amazing voice on YouTube. Lexi's actually been pretty successful on YouTube as well. So anyway, so yeah, in terms of setup, we had the trailer, and then Dave was on a 6-foot jib, and then Paul was on, I think it's a 6-foot slider, and they were on opposite sides of the room, so jib was on the right side of the room, or stage left, and then Paul on the slider was on the left side of the room, and then we had Grant on a tripod in the middle. We shot on my, advance a little bit here so we can see more of the actual concert. There we go. So we shot on my Sony PXW-Z 150s. We shot at 1080p 23976. I've always liked using 24 frame for music type events. It makes it feel more like a movie. So yeah, there were a number of challenges, especially considering we had such a small crew. So because there was only 4 of us doing the video production, I was wearing multiple hats. So in addition to setting up the equipment, basically being the engineer and technical directing, I also had to deal with playout and editing. So even though the entire concert looks like it was live, we had to pre-record some of the segments. So the artist in the middle, our Adam, he was unable to be there for the evening portion of it. He had another commitment where he wasn't going to be able to make that. So we actually pre-recorded his segments in the afternoon. So the way the day went, we showed up at the stadium. Sorry, showed up at the studio at 11 a.m. and then we had about 3 hours to set up everything, get it tested before we started shooting some of those pre-recorded segments at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And that took a while. Just, you know, there was figuring out the logistics of it all. Some rehearsal time in there, some other things. But basically, the pre-recorded segments we had from 2 o'clock p.m. to a little after 6 p.m. in order to get those shot, which it took basically the whole time. So yeah, even though those portions only made up probably 25 minutes of the final show, I mean, it took us a while to get those shot, and then I had to edit them between 6:30 p.m. and 8 o'clock p.m. when the concert actually went live. So we started so late because of the time difference. You know, Japan is 8 hours. Well, you could say they're 8 hours behind, but really they're 16 hours ahead of us, right? So for them, the concert started at noon on Saturday afternoon, but for us it was 8 p.m. So, but yeah, it was a bit of a challenge juggling all those hats and getting all that done. So I had to edit all this stuff together into packages that I could play during the actual event and try and make it look as seamless as possible, so you can't tell that we're cutting back and forth between live and pre-recorded stuff. But somehow we pulled it off and we made it work, and the result I think actually looks pretty good. So one of the things we did for the first time here, I'd never actually applied a LUT to the final output, but in this case we did. So what you're looking at here, this is actually the straight out of camera, so no effects or anything on this. But what we did is we applied a LUT to the final output. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that, and so there you go. So there it is with the LUT. So it's one of those kind of stereotypical blue, teal, orange or teal brown LUTs that are very common right now, very popular. And it did give the footage a certain kind of pop. I definitely increased the contrast a little bit, just gave it more of a style that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So anyway, like I say, this is the first time we'd actually done that. I've always had the equipment to do it. That's actually a little bit of a half-truth. Technically, I always apply LUTs to the feed going to my video encoder. So anytime I'm streaming, I do apply a little bit of a LUT, because it seems that the streaming devices that are out there tend to decrease the contrast and saturation of footage. And so I created a LUT a long time ago to counteract that, and so that the final footage that people are watching looks very close to what we're actually shooting. Without that, everything looks a little bit muddy and dull. But so this one, yeah, we applied this LUT in real time. We actually had to dial it back a little bit. The original LUT was just a bit too strong, so I took the LUT into DaVinci Resolve, adjusted the gain on that particular node, and brought it down to 70%. So the LUT you're seeing here is only 70% the original strength. It was a little bit over the top, so we're glad we pulled it back. In terms of technical challenges that we ran into, because there's always something, right? The biggest one was an issue I had with audio. So those who watch this channel know that I use a Dante-based system. I have a Yamaha TF3 mixer here in the trailer. We were not doing audio on this. Another guy named Doug Olson was doing audio, and he brought in an Allen and Heath mixer. He also had Dante on that, and so theoretically it was going to be easy. I just plug in the Dante, my system, into the Dante and put his, and then we'd be able to share audio between the two of us. Playback audio is coming from me in the trailer. You go into his mixer. He would mix that with anything going on there in the studio. So he had all the instruments mic'd. He had the artists on wireless systems. They also had wireless in-ear monitors. He was handling all that. I ran into a little bit of a challenge there when I could not get audio from Playout to make it into his mixer. It took me probably 45 minutes to figure out a workaround. I didn't figure out the actual solution until after the event was over. What it turned out to be was an obscure setting on my mixer that I wasn't even aware it had, where you can turn the direct outputs of the channels on and off. And for some reason, those those 2 channels that I was using for audio from playout were the direct out was turned off. So anyway, I come up with a workaround by sending it to some aux channels and then sending the aux channels over to Doug. Anyway, once I figured that out, everything worked great, and I was fortunate that the owner of the recording studio, who knows audio really well and knows how to create a great mix, like I say, is also a good friend of mine. He didn't have anything else to do, so he came out here in the trailer and he monitored audio levels for me, and then kind of rode the faders a little bit. So even if after the multi-band compressor that I use in my trailer, if the audio was getting close to being a little too hot or too low, he was tweaking it just a little bit. And he was also giving feedback to the guy doing the audio mix. We had them on radio so they could talk to each other. So that was the biggest technical challenge. The biggest challenges associated with this event were just time-wise. So getting the editing done, dealing with, well, another issue we had was a lot of the pre-recorded, or a lot of the graphics that I was sent were not in the right format. So either the wrong resolution or the wrong frame rate or the wrong codec. And I didn't get any of those until the night before, and so I didn't know that there was an issue. And so I was up really late the night before trying to re-render as best I could, and even then, for some reason I couldn't make Adobe Premiere handle the transparency information on the clips, because like the lower thirds and whatnot, they had an alpha channel, and yeah, I never did get that working. So I had to have the producer who created the graphics re-render for me, and for some reason the back and forth exchange, he missed something and he kept sending over files that weren't right in one way or another. So we eventually abandoned the idea of putting up the lower thirds for each individual song, and just did titles for the artists, names of the artists, and that was it in terms of that. But there was an awful lot of pre-recorded content that we had to play here, and I actually used the first time my HybridX Studio Minis in order to do playout. It's easier, and for most events I actually use Adobe Premiere, mostly because I'm not getting the footage that I need until like the day of, and I don't necessarily have time to re-render in the proper format for whatever we happen to be shooting, and to copy those to cards for playback with the HybridX Studio Minis. But in this case, I decided I was going to use the HybridX Studio Minis. I used 2 of them, one for video, any video clips, and then one for the graphics. And so the second one was actually hooked up for both fill and for key, so we had an alpha channel going, like I mentioned. And then the first one was just play out for video clips, and that all worked pretty well once all the clips rendered into the right resolution and frame rate and codec. So just as FYI, the codec that we used was ProRes 4444. The HybridX Studio Mini handles that one just fine, so that's what we settled on. It's a nice looking codec as well. So the video looks good. Let me jump ahead. Actually, more of the concert here. There we go. So yeah, this is the artist that we actually recorded ahead of time. So Adam. So these segments right here were actually pre-recorded earlier in the day, and these are the ones that I had to edit. We shot live to tape for those, so I didn't have to edit multicam stuff. It was mostly just the intro and outro and transition between clips that I had to work on, and so a little bit of juggling there in order to make it fairly seamless, where we jump back and forth between live and pre-recorded. See if I can find. Yeah, so let's find one of the transitions here. So yeah, when he finishes up and we switch to Lexi here in a moment, that's going from pre-recorded to live. So you'll see that coming up here in just a minute. So this is a little bit of a challenge in order to make all this work, and logistics, and like putting people in the right places in the room. And yeah, that was the transition right there. Putting people in the right places in the room so that it looks like it was possible for us to be cutting back and forth between 2 cameras that are live, and not revealing that the band was coming or going or whatever. But I think we pulled it off reasonably well considering the constraints that we had. So in terms of what I learned and what I would do different, I would definitely try and push more ahead of time to get the video clips, pre-rendered video clips, more than a day before the event. That was, I mean, I'd asked for them a week in advance, or asked to have them a week in advance, and they just couldn't do that for one reason or another. So I was very limited in the amount of time that I had to prep everything for playback, and like I say, a lot of stuff I was doing at the last second. In fact, right before we went live, there was a video clip that was supposed to be used for the opener that I didn't have, and I had to go out to Google Drive and download it, drop it into Adobe Premiere, re-render it as the ProRes 4444, the right frame rate, in order to even play that. So we actually started the concert, I think, 10 minutes late because of that. So that portion of it was at least partially my fault. So instead of starting right at 8 o'clock, it was close. It was like 8:08 when we actually finally took the stream live. Well, took the concert live. We had the stream was live. It was just showing an intro video up to that point. So originally, I was going to have to handle audio for all the translations, language translation as well. We were going to use some of the ISO booths at the recording studio to do the translation into the other 3 languages, and ultimately decided to handle that off-site. And so my job was just to handle the English feed, and then that was being sent to another building elsewhere, downtown Salt Lake City, for the translation, and then they re-encoded and then streamed it directly to YouTube and to Facebook. Somewhere in that chain between my trailer and the final YouTube and Facebook, the video bitrate got dropped way down, and so the quality on the live streams was quite a bit lower than what we were shooting. And so I've linked to the original video in the description of this video. Hopefully that's going to be there for a little while. I heard rumors that they were going to take it down and clean it up and repost it. I don't know when or if that's going to happen. But if you guys wanted to watch it, so the link is in the description down below. And there's a lot of material there that you actually know. So, but the first half of the concert was all popular songs from the last several decades. Popular songs like this one right here, "I Will Always Love You." That's from the '90s, Whitney Houston. So yeah, a lot of popular songs that are very well known, which is actually much easier for me than songs that I'm not familiar with, which is kind of what we transition to later in the concert. Songs by these artists. It's harder to call a show when you don't know the changes that are coming up. You don't know when it's going from a verse to a chorus, or you're going to an instrumental or a solo or whatever. It's much harder to call those than songs that I happen to know. So like some of these earlier ones, I think I did a better job directing on those than some of the later ones, just because they are songs that I knew. So, but so all in all, I think it went fairly well. My client is more than happy. They're quite thrilled with the way that it came off. And I think a lot of that's because of my crew. You know, like Dave and Paul and Grant, all 3 of them. They're excellent camera operators, and having the 2 moving cameras, one on jib and one on slider, that really adds something special to these. So that's the slider shot right there, and then I'm sure we'll transition to one of the others here in a second. Yeah, so that's jib. That's not one of the more exciting jib shots. We had several shots where he got right up in her face, and those shots were fantastic because the background really moves quite a bit. So this is just a static camera. Well, not really static, but it's just on a tripod, nothing special there. So he was only able to do pan and tilt and zoom. Back to the slider here. That's Paul on slider, and Dave on jib, and then Grant on tripod. But all 3 of them are awesome. So my work as a director was way easier than it could have been if I had been working with inexperienced camera operators. So these guys understand that, well, they understand how to do your motion in time with the way the transitions go. They understand that I like to do the transitions for music and the natural breaks for the song. Between lines or between chorus and verse or whatever. I like to go pull out wide at the end of a song, start wide and push in at the beginning of a song. These guys understand that kind of thing, and so I had a lot easier job directing them than I might have if it had been somebody else. So I think between the 4 of us, we were able to pull off something that was actually pretty cool, and Worked out pretty well, all things said. So let me jump ahead a little bit further to... oh, this is one of the pre-recorded segments. So they had 2 youth in... I think one in Korea, one in Japan, I think. I remember. So they sang the tracks, and then we had to switch. We had to, like I say, we pre-recorded some of this in the afternoon in order to get the timing right and everything like that. Theoretically, we could have done it live, but we decided to pre-record these. Anyway, so let me jump a little bit further and get some of the final artists. Madeline. So that's Madeline right there. I worked with Madeline many times. We used to shoot several of her concerts several years ago. Amazing, amazing vocalist. If you're looking to hear a great singer, Madeline is definitely it. Super sweet girl too. So yeah, there's Madeline. All 3 of them are up and coming and fairly well known in Utah area, especially with the youth. They're kind of looked up to, and I think all 3 of them are going places. Madeline actually was on The Voice on NBC a few years ago, and she did fairly well on there. And yeah, she's got a fantastic voice. And Lexi is a powerhouse vocalist as well. Personally, I prefer Madeline's style a little bit more. But anyway, so yeah, again, if you're watching this video within a few days of the time I post it, you should still be able to watch the concert. Again, with the caveat that it was re-encoded a couple of times before it finally made it up to YouTube, and so the quality is pretty soft compared to what we were shooting. The colors are a little dull and whatnot, a little bit low contrast compared to what we actually shot. But you'll get a feel for the work that we do at DJP. Could probably done better if we had more crews, like someone else to help me with the play out, instead of me having to technical direct and handle all the play out tasks as well. But all things considered, I think it went fairly well. I'm fairly happy with it. You know, you're always your own worst critic, and as I've gone back and watched it again, I see a lot of mistakes that I made, but I have to attribute a lot of them to just not knowing the songs, and so not necessarily knowing where to do the transitions and who to focus on in the shots for any given point in time. So anyway, so if you guys have any questions about how we did any of this, you can leave those in the comment section down below, and I'll do my best to answer the ones that I can quickly. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe and do content related to video production at least 3 times a week now. And 2 of those videos are in a fairly new series that we call the Stream Team. I do with my friend Whit, where we covered introduction to doing video production. So we started with the basics like cameras and what is a switcher and how do you hook those things up. And we're just going to keep building that series as time goes by. New episodes for that are dropping on Tuesdays and Thursdays here in the US, and it's going to be a little later for most of the rest of the world. But anyway, so please consider subscribing and watching those. Please share these videos with your friends, and if you'd love to help out with this channel, we have Patreon that we are using in order to try and cover the costs of having Whit do all the editing on these videos. This is more or less her only job right now, and so any help that you guys can give there is very much appreciated. You can also subscribe to my crewaccess.com website that I created for managing video production companies. I'll link to that in the description down below as well. So with that said, thanks for watching and have a fantastic day.